Alright guys, it finally happened. AMG gave us the full list of new crises in the War of Kings Crisis Pack, as well as giving us the list of crises that will be in the 2025 Challenger packet. So essentially we know how the game is going to work for the next year, finally. So with that, I'm going to kind of react to it, give some breakdowns, let you guys know kind of how what I think of it. And we're just going to go through it. So first of all, if you're not in the know, the new crisis packet is, or the new War of Kings pack is 10 new crises. It comes with Gladiator, and you get that and you can play the new crises. They're also going to be print and play as well, which I think is good. I think lowering entry to this. Also, it would make it a nightmare for, stores to know how many of these to order. Anyway, so with that, we have 8 new crises coming into the game, and we have 6 leaving. The 6 that are leaving are Demons Downtown, Gamma, Researcher, Spider Portals, Sword, and Paranoia. This is probably the list of the most problematic remaining crises in the game, with one notable exception. Hammers is remaining in the game. And I have long said that I think Hammers is the most problematic of the scenarios because of stacking hammers and how silly big characters get when they're starting to collect multiple hammers. It does not appear that they're going to errata any current crisis. But that being said, Hammers is problematic in a way that doesn't come up every game, whereas a lot of the crises that have been removed are less problematic in my mind, but their problems happen every game. So like Demons had the problem of you try to score a thing, you don't score it because you get dazed, and then you wake up on fire, which kind of sucks. Gamma forces the game into a narrow window where you don't play on like any of the map because if you stray outside, you're going to constantly take damage. And Researcher just kind of took over the entire game because scoring the Researcher was all that really mattered. It was like enough points that if you had that and like one other secure, you were dead even on secures and could just like fight. So these 3 crises really could just force fighting in against anyone. Like you just couldn't score out on those crises, and it made being tabled possible, which was a thing that had not really been super possible in Marvel before. So these leaving all make sense. Sword is also going. Sword was problematic because Sword had a win more mechanic. So if you win Sword, you also get a free push on an opponent's model in the power phase. So you can very easily then continue to win Sword because you've cost them an action that they have to spend to come back, or they've to spend some sort of resource to come back into it. And then Sword is also going because 15 is just gone from the game. There's no 15 threat crisis anymore, which I think is good. I would have liked to see 16 go as well and them introduce higher threats, but I know I'm in the minority there because I think we're going to be a year from now, and how 2 years ago, we were all like, 14 is such a problem, blah, blah, 14, 14, 14. And now for the last year and a half, we've been 15, 15, oh my God, 15. And I'm kind of thinking that 16 will be the next one. The reason that I think that the breaking point is 16 is because the game was designed at 17 threat, essentially. The core box scenarios are all 17 threat. The game was originally planned to be 17 threat. And I think the farther you get from that number, the more, or the lower you go at least, the sillier it gets, and the swingier it gets. All right, the last 2 to go are Spider Portals and Paranoia. These are coming from the scenario team side of the game. Spider Portals is a really frustrating crisis because the place for rolling a skull was so absurdly punishing because it's already on a D shape, so it's already the most spread out crisis in the game. And then anytime you tried to flip and you hit the skull, you got pushed off of it, making it easier for your opponents to flip. It was just really punishing, and it was really random when it was punishing. And there were teams that were good at it, but even the teams that were good at it hated playing it, and it added a lot of randomness that was really brutal. If this had been on a scenario that was tighter, where you could ostensibly have the actions to walk back on the point after you get placed off, I don't think it would be as punishing. But with it being a D shape, sometimes you got ported off and now you can't get to 2 points anymore, and you could barely get to 2 points before. So I'm glad Spider Portals is gone. I'm kind of floored that D shape has largely stuck around, but okay, we're moving the game in a more scenario direction, which is I think I'm okay, all okay with. I think I'm overall okay with. Lastly, Paranoia goes. Paranoia was like really problematic in that like it really rewarded having healing factor characters because like it punished picking up and not being standing next to someone. And then also the 3-2 split could be really, or the 3-1 split could be really punishing because of the extra victory points. So if I could get three of the four off the table, it wasn't 3-1, it was 4-2 because of the extra victory point running around. And it meant that like Paranoia could score absurdly fast, especially in anyone that wasn't like on top of how to play Paranoia. And the teams that were good at it were really good at it. Like X-Men were freaking amazing at it. When Brotherhood was like one of the strongest things in the game, Brotherhood was absurd this crisis. I'm kind of overall happy to see it go. And with like some of the new stuff that's come in, like I kind of think there's a new Paranoia and there's a new sword that are like better balanced in that direction. So I think these leaving is fine. The crises that are staying are extract-wise. We have Alien Ship, Montesi, Legacy Virus, Cubes, Hammers, Spider-Infected Senators, Skrulls. The only ones of these that I'm kind of unhappy about are Cubes and Hammers. They're the two stackable crises that are left that still reward being kind of tall because you can collect them all on one character. Cubes is like pretty fair because it's like fast and like tall teams are not typically good at fast crises. And like it punishes you for holding them. But Hammers gets out of control really fast. As a shield player, I guess I'm happy that Hammers is staying in the game because Hammers is busted on shield models. Like we have a bunch of rapid fire models. It's really good on grunts. There's like a million things that Hammers is good for us. But I would have liked to see them make Hammers and Cubes now stack. The other one here in the extracts that surprises me is Montesi is sticking around. I thought this was really weird because there's a second Montesi coming out that's like remarkably similar to it. It's like Montesi, but there's one more point and it has a different layout. But like it's Montesi, and it's weird that there's two. We'll talk about it more when we get to that crises, but I was surprised by that. The secures that are staying in are Fisk, Man, Extremis, Intrusions, Infinity, Scoundrels, Meteors, and Cosmic Vaults. Or Cosmic Invasion, depending on... I don't think the community's really settled on the nickname for that crisis. With a lot of the fighting crises leaving, there's only a couple here that are really fighting crises, and they're kind of more brawling crises. Like, none of these are particularly conducive to like how S.H.I.E.L.D. plays the game, where it like wants to stand far away from you and shoot you. Instead, there's like a bunch of meet-in-the-middle crises that'll force fights, and then there's kind of like the Infinity-shaped things. So like Madman Infinity, Meteors, Fisk... Intrusions are like the new fighting crises, and they're like much faster than the old fighting crises. So the game is moving in a scoring points direction. All right. Before we get to the exciting part, let's talk about the two things that aren't coming in, which are Strike Team and Ship Security. Strike Team is a new D shape that has like a soft Scoundrels effect. Essentially, you get to reroll if you're within 2 of the thing. I'm okay with this not coming in. I think 3 D shapes is absurd, and especially 3, like this is kind of the Spider Portals replacement, so I am somewhat surprised it's not coming in, but I also don't think that there should be 3 D shapes in the game. Like, I kind of wish there was only one, but it's fine. I'm happy that it's not coming in. I think its effect is cool, and like having a softer Scoundrels, and I think this would be a pay-to-flip that like Webs would actually be really good at. And it would probably mean you'd see Parker a lot more, or by Parker I mean Amazing Spider-Man, because he's really good at pay-to-flips, and he's really good at wide pay-to-flips, and then you give him another reroll. Would be cool, but for that reason, I think post-nerfs, Webs are kind of like, if not the strongest thing in the game, in the discussion for the strongest thing in the game, so not making them better, like, twist my arm. And then Ship Security is not coming in. This is a Skrull shape. It's exactly the same shape as Skrulls, except it's an asset, and it gives power if you're interacting while you're holding it. And since you can only interact with, like, you can't interact with other extracts because it's not stackable extract, it kind of like soft encourages you to play the secure, especially if it's a pay to flip, with models that are holding the extract, which I think was cool. I'm not surprised it's not coming in because Skrulls isn't leaving, and having two exactly shaped extracts means that like if a team was like Skrulls is our best extract, having two of it would be problematic. All right, let's talk about the crises that are coming in. We're going in alphabetical order because I'm unoriginal, let's say. Okay, so first up, Deadline to Destruction. This is the most troublesome crisis in the pack. It can do an absurd amount of damage. So it's a normal crisis. You stand on it. It's on this weird new like compressed D shape. It's like super compressed, like way closer. It's almost like a tipped sword in terms of like how close the points are together. So you choose an enemy within 3 of the console that's holding an extract, and you pay a power to interact, and it takes a damage and gains a power. Unlike cubes, the damage is not conditional on the power. If you pay with like Beta Ray Bill or Kingpin and you prevent the damage, you still get the power. So like this doesn't do anything to those characters. They just like pay the power and they just pay a power, gain a power, and that's all it does, and you're down a power. So it doesn't do anything to them, so stocks up on them in this crisis. But like something like, I don't know, Red Skull Grunts could like start on a point, interact, deal a damage, walk, interact, deal a damage. And then Red Skull could like interact, deal a damage, punch, blitz strike or blitz sprint to the other point, deal a damage, walk, deal a damage. Yeah, this is it's kind of wild how much damage this can do to crisis characters. And it also makes like a lot of the solutions to protecting crisis or extract runners, like Bodyguard. Like this just completely goes around Bodyguard. Like let's say you have, I don't know, anyone in Steve 1, standing next to Steve 1, very safe. Like you're holding brace, you've got Steve 1. I don't know how they're gonna kill this model, and it's got 2 health, and you just like run to 2 crises, and you're like, boop boop, you're dead. I'll pick up your extract. So this is worrisome. I think this is the premier fighting scenario now. So this is coming into my shield list at least for a little while. It seems this is the one that, of all the new scenarios, this is the one I am the most worried about becoming a problem. But I am excited. It seems cool. I'm not a big fan that it encourages you to avoid the secures with your extract holders. Although maybe the area is so big that like outside of standing in the corner, you're going to get affected by this. And I think it's fairly easy to stand in a spot where you're not affected by more than one of them. But yeah, this one worries me a little bit. But I think this is going to be the premier fighting scenario. This is yeah. So if you're an attrition team, play Deadline to Destruction. And also it's like named really cleverly, like Deadline to Destruction. Which teams want this scenario? It's the teams that want to destroy you. Next up, we have Guardians save Shi'ar Empress in style. There's a pay to flip. It's on a new shape. It's further apart than Sword, but closer than Infinity and Madman, at least width-wise. They're the same distance from the edge of the board vertically. If you are a fasto, which means a character that's above normal speed, medium base, medium move, small base, long move, you can still double walk to the far one. So you can do the Sword thing of having your fast characters double walk, try to flip the opponent's points, see if you can get up on points early by taking risks that way. Its core mechanics it's a pay to flip that a pay to flip style we've never seen before, where it's always 3 dice. Before they've always been like tied to a specific stat. This one's just you roll 3 dice, you need hits, crits, and wilds more than healthy models. And then if you're holding extract tokens, you get to reroll a dice, which means if you're holding an extract, it's really easy to go flip over people because a reroll is even more similar to an extra dice in this style or in pay to flips because there's no crits. Like you don't get, there's no way to roll extra dice in. The only thing that changes is like your cap of maximum rolls. Because you still like, so if opponent, oh, and the other thing that's nice about this is that because you like have, it's only roll 3 dice. If you put 3 things on a point that are healthy, your opponent cannot flip the point without moving someone. So this is like one of the easiest ones to fully stop as far as a pay to flip. The reroll mean, I think, encourages extract players to come play the game without being like you have to have your extract player stand on the point. I overall like this one. I think like factions that will really like it. I'm looking at playing it in my spider foes. I think it kind of hits like anybody that really liked sword before is going to like this shape. So like the Jonks list, I think will like Empress. Like foes like Empress, and then I'm not sure who's gonna shake out to be the strongest pay to flip faction. It's probably still X-Men, so X-Men will probably play this thing. X-Men like this a lot more than than like they ever liked Spider Portals. So overall, I like this one. It feels like they've really learned from the mistakes of prior pay to flips, and I think this one is the most interesting. Like it has no punish mechanic for failing the flip. The punish mechanic for like failing the flip is that you like spent a power. You don't also need to take a damage. Yeah, I like this one. I think this one's cool. All right, next up, Inhumans deploy advanced weaponry. It's on a new shape. It's like 2/2 on the wings. There's like 2 extracts on the left and 2 extracts on the right. And they're really far out there. It's a Montesi beam, but it's energy, so it's like old Montesi. So it's still a hexed range 3 beam with 6 dice that can't have rerolls put on it. So it doesn't explode crits, doesn't do rerolls. So because of those 2 things, there aren't really a lot of characters that abuse it. I think the best examples are the extract grunts like these. Especially Nick, because like laying the beam down and getting power for each damage you deal with a beam is really relevant. Are they still once per turn? Let's look at that. Yes, the attack is still once per turn. I think this is going straight in my shield list. I really like it due to the grunt interaction, and then I can plan on having these books on my grunts in 2 out of 3 scenarios. It also means that like shield can play like the triple weapon suite, which is Montesi book, Inhuman weapons, and hammers. So like the grunts, like if I get forced onto my extracts, the grunts are better than they are normally, no matter what. And I think that's going to be really impactful for shield, especially with like the really good fighting scenarios going away. Okay, so next up we have Macran Crystals Get Heroes Home. This is literally the sword shape. It's also a sword style pay to flip. So this is the replacement for sword. And I think they liked a lot of what Sword was doing outside of its specific like winning mechanic of the push. And I think that makes a lot of sense. I do still sometimes find Sword frustrating where, there's some characters that can just run the bases and they just get to take 3 flips. And they're just like, oh, I have 3 power and I'm going to pay to flip the one I'm standing on, walk, pay to flip, walk, pay to flip. And if I had 2 to 3 coin flips, I just like made an enormous swing. So, it's like a 4 victory point swing, and you only hit 2 of the 3. So I find that part of it frustrating. But it's also like you can't fail it on turn 1, which is great. God, I hate failing pay to flips on turn 1. And then you get an extra power in the power phase if you are contesting one of these and holding an extract, which I think is another nice touch that like encourages the extract holders to hang out on the secures, while not like being like you have to do this or you're dead or whatever. I think is really cool. Like I think it's cool design. I think encouraging people to stay on the hill in King of the Hill with the capture the flag elements of the game is good design. I'm really excited to play this one. Foes again, I think play this one. The Jonks list with Sin plays this. I think X-Men love this scenario. Overall, another really good one. I'm into it. Next up, we have an extract. Scientific samples found in undiscovered universe. It's a D shape. While holding these, when you roll a skull, you get a power once per turn. Kind of like the genius thing that like Shuri has or that Beast has. I like the theming there because like the rolling skulls and getting extra power is like tied to being smart. This is like you're doing science. I think that works. The other part of this one is that if all of your extract holders are within 2 of a secure, you score an extra victory point. This is really interesting design. I think the jury is very out on whether this is good or not, but man, it's interesting. So, safe grabs are a huge deal on these, depending on the shape of the secure. If the secure is also a D shape, safe grabs probably don't matter that much. But being able to safe grab and then get back onto an infinity point or something will be a huge deal. And then the other thing that's really interesting is that most lists that play in the game don't have multiple safe grabs. It's like X-Men, maybe Midnight Suns. I think that's it. Like Shield has a pseudo safe grab because of the grunts, but like that doesn't really count for this discussion. So because of that, if I go 3-1 in extracts, so like I pick up 3, you pick up 1, the split in points is probably 3-2 because I don't have double safe grab, so I probably can't get all of them onto the extracts or onto the secures to be able to score the bonus victory point, whereas your 1 that is like starts on your baseline, you can totally get to secure because, I mean, barring terrain, you can walk to infinity, which is like the widest one now, or the farthest one from this secure with a medium mover. You can just walk medium to the edge, walk medium, you make it. So I think that's really good. I think foes freaking love this crisis. Even though they don't have built-in safe grabbers, I know a lot of foes lists are splashing Namor, so they bring a safe grab. And then the extra power in such a power-starved faction is going to be a really big deal. So I think this is really exciting for them. Also, any team that like rolls lots of dice and wants extra power, I think this is pretty interesting in Spiders. I think it's pretty interesting in a lot of places. I also just love its theming, like it being scientific samples and it having the extra power for rolling skulls. You're doing some serious science over here, guys. All right, next up, we have Terrigen Canister Fuels Doomsday Device. This is a new F shape with 5 assets. When you pick it up, you do a scroll roll or you take poison. So it's you roll your physical defense, you need a crit or a wild, or you get the poison condition. Also, while you're holding, your speed is slow. This is an interesting scenario in that it's like, it's very fast. It's like among the fastest scenarios. There's now 3 5-wide extracts. So if you want Spiders to go maximum sprint to the finish on extracts, you can do that now. You can play 3 5s. I think scenario teams presenting 3 5 extracts may put you in a world where even a fighting team goes my extracts because they've picked the slowest extracts, and there's several like 3 wide extracts right now, and controlling that speed can be a big deal. So I think the like crisis choice isn't going to be so secure favored. I think it's still going to be heavily secure favored, but I don't think it's going to be as secure favored if the dominant scenario teams are playing 3 5 extracts. Other important notes about this one, poison's like the most common immunity in the game. There's lots of poison immunity, like all Inhumans are immune to poison, all the robots are immune to poison, all the Hulks are immune to poison. Lots of poison immunity running around. I think Spiders are going to like this one. I think they like it more than cubes. Like taking poison sucks, but like also not taking auto points rules. Being a slow mover hurts Spiders, but it doesn't hurt them as much as other factions. And like on a 5-wide extract, you're not going to have all the extracts, and making their extract holders bad at chasing down your extract holders when you're going to be in the lead, I think can be really powerful for Web Warriors. And I mean, potentially other scenario teams, but especially Web Warriors who have like a lot of the built-in mobility. And then I also think the thing that's really interesting about this is it's like kind of reverse cubes, in that cubes are like, pick this up and it like accelerates the game. It's like everything gets more power, everything takes more damage, right? You can stack them, and this kind of slows it down. Like stuff doesn't get away as much and you have less power. So I think that's interesting. But yeah, like this is a big scenario team one. Ideally things with action compression and things that if you win, like I think extract focused teams that get to go first and can pick their extracts and know they're 5 wide and they get to safe grab the middle, I think is going to be an archetype we are just going to see a ton of. All right, next up is, I think, another really, really interesting crisis in that it's in a shape we haven't seen since the dreaded days of Panic. Unexpected Guests Crash Royal Wedding. It's a 4 extract similar to the Infinity setup, but it's closer width-wise, kind of like the secure we talked about earlier, Empress. Is it on the same shape as Empress? Let's find out. Empress is on M, and Wedding is on N. No, they're on different shapes. Okay, so they're not on the same shape. But anyway, so it's closer in than Infinity. But it's like an even split crisis. It's 2 for you, 2 for me kind of a thing. And if you want to go over there and grab them, you can grab them with the fast characters. So like, like Black Cat can do it. Any medium base, medium mover, you can go like take your bill and like double walk over there and pick it up and then try to live. But like breaking the symmetry of this extract is going to be tough, and I think it's going to be really good for the teams that are strong but have really weak turn ones. That like don't innately have safe grabs. Or teams that are looking to just like fight you. I think this is another really interesting one there. Because if the other team wants to go up on turn 1, they have to do it either with the secure, which probably means committing to the midline, or they have to come onto my side of the board and let me shoot them early before I pick these up. And then a draw state where I'm the beatdown should give me more time to kill your models and make you unable to play the game so that I can win on scenario. This is also the only new civilian in the game, so it is the most resilient to being stolen, as there are many characters with steals that cannot steal civilians now. Quicksilver, Sin Leadership, Namor, Human Torch. Those are the big ones. I'm sure I'm missing one. Anyway, so I think that's interesting. It's also the only new extract that doesn't force midline interaction, like we talked about earlier. I'm a little bit worried about this one. I'm a little bit worried that like the openers will be so rote that kind of turn 1 will be boring. And then you really start the game on turn 2. But also there are teams that are looking for that. Like right now, there's just like microcosm in the game that I've noticed where like a lot of people are playing Abomination because he's new. And Abomination, I think, is kind of just worse Ulik in a lot of ways, except that he plays the game on turn 1. And Ulik does not play the game on turn 1, and that is one of the reasons that Ulik is considered like a weak model right now for a 5 threat, because he's a 5 threat that doesn't play the game on turn 1. He does nothing. He double walks on turn 1. And then he's up and running and doing stuff turn 2, and then he's a pretty good model there, especially if he hits his wilds or gets enough power to spender. But Abomination started playing the game on turn 1, and I think there's lots of teams that like are considered weak because they don't play the game on turn 1. And I think Royal Wedding is going to help you with that. And then to continue our wedding theme, we have our last secure here, or our last crisis, which is Wedding Party Targeted in Terrible Attack. It's like a wider version of Fisk. It's like farther out towards the edges of the board than Fisk, but it's 2 2-point points. Ooh. It's 2 secure tokens that are worth 2 each. And when you score them, your opponent gets to move them 2, but instead of doing damage and stun, you just lose 1 power, which I think is great because like Fisk is so punishing when you score it. Like it can be so much damage and so much power denial. And this is just lose 1 power. And like because of those things, like Fisk is largely seen as a crisis you are going to that the person that brings it tries to constantly tie it and fight you. And then when like it slips from them, the opponent scores 2 points and you get a bunch of free damage and you get to try to like tie it again. This I think you can play in that same way, but I also think you can play in those teams that are like really good at brawling, but also like don't necessarily like win fights consistently due to like their lack of damage. They're just like kind of tanky idiots, and so they can like put scenario pressure on while still just being on the midline. It'll probably end up being a fighting crisis. It's way less punishing than Fisk. All right, so let's summarize with some or let's do some fun facts about this crisis thing. There's no new extract that is stackable. Every single extract in here is you can hold one. Perfect. Let's fix that with the other stackable ones, except for maybe Legacy, because Legacy has like a cool gimmick. Of the five, the three of the secures are pay to flips. Two of them are going to be legal, so we're even split at 2-2 joining into the game. But it didn't actually like increase the volume of that because we lost two pay to flips. There are 4 new assets and 1 civilian. Only 3 of the assets are legal. There's now 4 legal civilian crisis cards, which probably helps Terrigenesis. It also helps if you're worried about being stolen from, as like Namor's everywhere and Namor can't steal civilians. So if Namor is a thing you're worried about, think about playing some civilian crises. Yeah, and then of the new crisis cards, only 2 aren't coming into the pack. All right, so where are we from here? Let's try to wrap it up with some final thoughts. First of all, the game is getting faster in terms of scoring. It is going to be harder to play pure attrition, and I think that's good for the game. The more we interact with the crisis of Marvel Crisis Protocol, I think the healthier the game is. That being said, there's a lot of interesting little things going on here to prevent scoring teams from just like running away from with the game. That being said, I expect the scenario teams to be the strongest thing out of the gate. If you are an experienced Web Warriors player, this is your best time to win a tournament, right? Take your Web Warriors, go crush some people, use your ability to adapt to new crisis to your advantage. Other teams, like I think Criminal stock way up. I think there's lots of really interesting Kingpin plays going on here, especially with some of the fast crises that have moved in. I think I think there's some interesting stuff to do with Kingpin here. Where the fighting teams go is going to be a thing to watch. I mean, I think Deadline of Destruction is the no-brainer for people, but I think there's lots of other really interesting options between like Intrusions and Fisk and Wedding Party are all really, really interesting. So with that, I'm going to pass it off to you guys. What do you guys think are the new crises? Or better yet, in the comments below, tell me the team you're going to play first with the new crises and which new crises you're going to put in, because I'm really curious where the meta is going to go. But I'm going to wrap it up there, guys. And don't forget that no matter which crisis you're playing, that fun is a finite resource.